Hey, I just wanted to take you guys through the destruction system I built for Unity. There's a lot of learnings in how to keep destruction cheap and affordable so that it could run at 90 frames a second in VR. So, and a lot of the destruction system is how the code is designed to work with the art and how the code is designed to manipulate the art. Which is why I want to take you through this. One thing you'll see, so you know it's not a bug, you'll see these big black hole looking things. It's actually dots from a signed distance field shader. So long term, I'll just make a tile. You see it's like little polka dots. The idea there is what it's gonna do is allow artists to paint ink onto the ships, almost like if you think about Tales of the Borderlands or something like that, that really like a comic booky look. So it's not a bug, which is why I call it out. Any case, to take you guys through the destruction system, before I do that, I'm just going to cut to a quick video sort of showing you the destruction system in action. So any case, destruction system is made up of a couple parts. First off is the destructible ship. Destructible ship, it could be any entity. In this case, it's a ship. It has a little bit of custom logic and how ships specifically blow up in terms of what that looks like. Made up of a couple parts: the main model, and then a bunch of destructible meshes. Now, what this was done for, this design is basically to keep the set pass calls really low. One of the problems Unity has is, it's not really super good at batching. Every object is basically one draw call for the mesh, and then it's got to render to the depth buffer, and then you're talking another pass for the shadows, and then if you have shadow cascades, it's additional passes, and that's for every object. And because Unity dispatches passes to the GPU on the main thread, and not like a secondary or thread, it really is, you'll become CPU bound really quick, especially in VR, if you're not really keeping those set pass calls really low. So the main model here, the reason this was designed this way is basically it's the whole thing put together into a singular mesh. And what that does is when the ship is undamaged, the rest of this is all completely hidden. And then, there can be in preferences, the idea is that you can set like, hey, how many ships are we going to allow to show damage at any one time to keep that, performance, to keep everything running really nice. And then, of course, if there's a boss or something and it was important to gameplay that you really need to see the damage on a particular ship, we could prioritize that. But that's the concept here. So when like 10 ships are flying around and none of them are damaged, it doesn't take all these additional set pass calls that you would get otherwise. So basically what happens is the destructible ship here will hide the main model the second that the ship starts getting damaged. So that'll just go away. And they'll start unhiding this stuff. Now, some of these things are hidden on startup, some of these internals that are sticking out, but I'll get into that. So basically, next, I showed you guys there's the main model, and then there's these destructible meshes. So if I click one of these destructible meshes, what this is basically, it does a couple things. First off, it's when it reaches a certain damage threshold, and that's defined, basically there's a hitbox as a child of every destructible mesh or destructible effects object. And this hitbox will tell its parent, hey, I've reached this damage threshold, so you should start showing damage. When it does that, we swap in a material, and it's defined right here. Now we want to use dot shared material, and the reason we don't just like change this material and we actually swap a material is it keeps it instanced, again, to keep the draw calls down. If we change this material here, if we change this material, it would become instanced, and then it basically couldn't batch anymore. Where if I just assign a material as a shared material, it's just the same material used again. So it would basically apply that there. What that is a cutout shader with back face calling turned off, and that lets you see like the back polygons and all that. The other thing it would do, the destructible effects here knows what to unhide. So in this case, it's got this here. I'm going to pull this up. There's some duplication I'll get into later. You'll say, hey, there's another whole wing. Again, that's going to be for set pass calls, and I'll show you why that was done. So the destructible effects here, though, basically when it's, it's going to swap in the material when it takes enough damage, and then it's going to unhide this thing here, So then you get to see some of the cool internals of the ship. You really feel like you're starting to blow holes in it. So that's that. There's some special case stuff. There's a wingtip here, so like the sail. The sail works a little bit differently. It's pretty similar. It's still destructible effect. But one of its hitboxes is a hitbox that inherits from a normal hitbox. It's called a sail end. And all that hitbox knows is, hey, when my parent gets damaged, when it's going to get damaged, let's hide. Let's disable myself. So this hitbox becomes disabled. And the reason that is when a sail gets damaged, it basically hides itself, it hides its sail part, and you see that it gets blown off. And we don't want that hitbox there, allowing you to shoot something that isn't actually there. The destructible effects also has the ability to spawn in rigid bodies. So the rigid bodies it spawns in, it's just a prefab, but I'll just use this one here, actually. It's there. And spawning something like this is for a different sail. So basically all this is it's a destructible rigid body. This would be spawned at startup, actually. The system would position it and unhide it, and that's just, because you don't want to create objects at runtime in Unity. And this has a force position. That's like where the explosive force happens. Relative to, you don't want it necessarily to happen from origin to the center point. You want it to happen from under it or whatever to create a really cool effect. And then you have these different pieces, and those are just individual rigid bodies that fall, and they make it look like you actually really blew the end of that sail off. So that's one special case destructible effects. It's still built within the same system, but works a little differently. So then the other part is we have these things called breakable parts. And what a breakable part is when the ship really dies, right? What we wanted to do is have it really blow apart. We didn't just want it to start falling. We wanted to have chunks blow off, and we wanted it to be different every time, so that it was a bit random. So we have this thing called destructible breakable part, and that's actually why there's two wings. I didn't want to have all the little breakable parts that could fall off just appear when the wing was damaged, because that's, again, it's more set pass calls. You have to have all these little individual objects. That would be really sad. So what it does is it unhides the wing when the wing gets to a certain damage point here, and then when I'm right at its death point, right when it's really gonna die, then it's okay. We hide. This will hide, and the destructible breakable part will unhide its other pieces, and then randomly break itself off. When it breaks itself off, what it's actually doing is just creating an empty rigid body. Again, those can be spawned right at startup and just sort of moved around and stuff, but there's these destructible rigid body empty things. It's basically creating that at wherever the object is, and then just reparenting itself to this new rigid body and applying a force so that it can spin away. And then the breakable parts can say, hey, I want X amount of my children to break when I break, and have them break off from me, and I want that to have a random chance. And those are all tunable parameters, and it really keeps it feeling like every time I kill a ship, it's just going to be a little bit different. You never really know what's going to happen. So that's a destructible system in a nutshell. Sort of the things you had to think about when building it to keep everything performing really well in VR.